Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Okay, the supercilious piglet in question was my father's mother, or Nana, as we kids called her. And she was one of the least pleasant people you could ever wish to avoid meeting. She was rude, obnoxious, racist, classist, played favorites with family members, and switched favorites at the drop of a hat, depending on who had pleased or displeased her most recently. Hated kids, made us sit outside in the rain when our parents were visiting her. Generally, an all-around nasty, petty, horrible person who treated everyone around her so badly. This is one of the two stories in which I got to witness and contribute to her getting taken down a few pegs. This story took place in New Zealand back in 1979. At the time my parents were separated, I was living with my mom in Hamilton and we were hosting an exchange student from Tahiti who was attending my high school. I should call him Tahitian Pro, because he was a great guy and like a brother to me. I later stayed with him and his family in Tahiti as part of the same exchange program, but that's not really relevant to the story. So of course Tahitian Pro hung out with my friend group and met other members of my family, and therefore the expectation was that we visit my dad. I think he was living in Bairoa at the time, and when we did, Dad took us to Nana's house in Morrinsville. Why? I have absolutely no idea. Dad should have known better than that. So we go to Nana's place and she sees someone whose first language isn't English and whose skin is not white. And she immediately starts showing off all of her daddy jewelry that hasn't been cleaned since Queen Elizabeth's coronation, and going on and on about how well off she's been all her life. A lie, by the way. She clearly thinks that Tahitian Pro, not being as good at English as she was and not being white, was too stupid to see that she was deliberately being patronizing and putting on airs, which he's fluent in at least 2 languages. Then, oozing false interest, Nana asked what Tahitian Pro's father earns per year. This was supposed to be her triumph, hearing how this dark-skinned islander lives in a grass hut subsisting on bananas and coconuts or something, but instead, it was the invitation for Tahitian Pro and I to exact revenge on her for the nonsense she just put him through. Tahitian Pro then politely and quietly gives a figure. I can't remember exactly, but it was in the realm of tens of millions of francs. Something over 20 million. French Polynesian francs. I knew that at the time the exchange rate was around 1,000 French Polynesian francs to 10 New Zealand dollars. So the figure was merely in the order of hundreds of thousands of New Zealand dollars. Still an insane amount of dollars by 1979 standards. His father did own a large business after all. Nana's look of shock was priceless. She just spent the better part of, well, it felt like a year to me going on about how superior and rich she was, and now she couldn't believe what she was hearing, but it was impossible to not see he was being completely honest. What? She snapped. She looked directly at me. What did he say? Her great plan to establish her superiority over the dark-skinned foreigner was on a shaky ground, and she was desperate to hear that the foreigner had misspoken. Hiding my great delight at her clear discomfort, I turned to Tahitian Pro. Comeuppance? How much? He had an imploring look on his face that I could read as, please, pretty please, do not convert it. And he really needn't have worried because I had absolutely no intention of doing so. I'd had to put up with this bitter, nasty, bigoted old hag for all of my life. I even had to live with her for a number of months when I was a kid. And I had no intention of letting her get away with trying to belittle Tahitian Pro. As impressive as 200-odd thousand was, at 20-odd million packed a lot more punch. Tahitian Pro said, X million francs. I knew Nana was stewing in her own juices, desperate to hear something that would enable her to rationalize it as being due to a stupid islander who doesn't know proper English. So I made a great play of clarifying. Million? I queried. And when Tahitian Pro responded with, oui, I further sought clarification, dragging it out. Nepamil? Not Southend? Like I didn't know. Nana couldn't understand French, but it was certainly clear that I was checking most carefully, making sure I hadn't confused it with a similar sounding word. Non. Million. He replied, shaking his head. I turned back to Nana. Yeah, X million francs. She looked gutted, absolutely sick to the stomach. It was glorious. No way her daddy and tawdry collection of jewelry could match up to 200 plus thousand, much less 20-something million. Not long later, Dad took us back to Mom's house in Hamilton, and after he'd left, the Haitian pro tried to tell my mom about the visit and was so flustered and angry he could barely express himself in English, kept lapsing into French, and about the only phrase that my mother could understood was, "She, that bloody woman." We all had a great laugh about it afterwards, though. And thinking of it has been a source of great satisfaction for me over the years. This is the first of two occasions I was present for where my disgusting and bigoted Nana set herself up for some richly deserved comeuppance, and I was only too happy to assist her in attaining it. If people are interested enough, I can post the second at some stage. There is something really satisfying when someone who makes life miserable for everyone around them sets up the means of their own downfall and dangles it in front of the very people who would like to get revenge for a lifetime of misery. As with the previous story, the supercilious bigot in question was my father's mother, whom we, my siblings, cousins, nieces, and nephews called Nana. The bane of our existence for years, all our lives up to that point in the case of Dad and us youngsters. Racist, classist, and prejudiced in many other ways. Quick to find fault with anyone, hated kids, and wasn't terribly fond of most adults either. Children should be seen and not heard. And it seems that they shouldn't be seen very much either. Mention her to one of my adult nieces and you get, that was a horrible old lady that made us sit outside in the rain when we were kids. Traumatized for life, poor girl. Nana also had a pity vindictive streak a mile wild, and if you annoyed her in any way, she would go out of her way to get revenge and make your life miserable with her nastiness. So this happened in New Zealand sometime in the 1980s. I was living at my mother's house in Hamilton. Dad and my younger brother had moved from Bairoa and were living just outside Hamilton, and Nana, who was finding it difficult to look after herself, had left Morrinsville and moved into Dad's house outside Hamilton. Although my parents were separated, there wasn't really any bad blood, so there was this day that Mom and I were over at Dad's place to visit. Nana's current gripe, of course she was always griping about something or someone, usually someone, was my younger brother's friends. You probably know the sort. Long hair, beards, or at least not reliably clean-shaven, most likely tattoos, rough, untidy clothes, propensity to use coarse language, hands frequently grease-stained from working on their cars and bikes, rough at the edges. Just the sort of people that a classist bigot would view unfavorably and judge harshly. In the parlance of the time, hairy as the adjective and the singular noun, hairies as a plural noun. As an aside, the term hairy could be applied to both my younger brother and myself for most of our late teen and adult lives. So Nana was going on and on about younger brother's hairy mates, those bloody hairies, spouting at length how they are no good, uncouth, dirty, smelly, disgusting, useless, lazy, hoodlums, criminals, a whole 9 yards. Oh, just because they looked a bit rough/scruffy. Younger brother couldn't say a thing in his friend's defense and point out how supportive and loyal they were without Nana cutting him off and talking over him. So Mom stepped in, pointing out that appearances mean little and that the so-called hairies are often the loveliest, most helpful people you can meet. Mom pointed out that if your car breaks down and you are stranded, it is not the rich guy in a Mercedes that's going to stop to help you. It's more likely to be some hairy in a beat-up old hold-in that stops and gets your car working again or takes you to the nearest town to get help. That is roughly the gist, not word for word. This was around 4 decades ago. I'm pretty sure Mom mentioned she was grateful for the help she's received from hairies over the years. This unsurprisingly prompted Nana to launch into a rant about how rich she was and how they always had reliable cars and had never been in such a situation as Mom described, and moreover would never put herself in a position where she had to accept help from or be grateful to a Harry. You can see where this is going, can't you? So the topic somehow got off Harry's and onto other things, and then Nana, unsatisfied if she's not whining about someone, started going on about how she wanted Dad to go to her doctor in Morrinsville and to pick up her prescription. But Dad won't do it. Dad pointed out that he had been busy with other things and will get it done when he can, in plenty of time before her pills run out. But this was not good enough for Nana, who wanted it done yesterday. I think any relief younger brother might have felt that he and his bloody hairy mates were no longer the target of Nana's displeasure was probably diminished by the fact that he still had to put up with the sound of her constant whining. I know it was getting on my nerves. Then Mom piped up. Don't worry, Mom. She still called her ex-mother-in-law Mom. I'll get your prescription for you. That surprised me, Dad, and younger brother. But we said nothing, and Nana was really pleased. Mom was briefly her favorite person. So as Mom and I were heading home, she revealed her plan. You see, younger brother is not the only one with bloody hairy mates. And I had a former school friend still living in Morrinsville that I regularly hung out with, who was a bloody hairy, and Mom thought he'd jump at the chance to be helpful. So I phoned our instrument of revenge, my hairy mate out in Morrinsville, and filled him in on the whole story. Nana's tirade about the bloody hairies and how she would never put herself in a position where she'd ever be grateful to one, and how she desperately wanted someone to bring her prescription over from Morrinsville. You could hear the grin on the other end of the phone. Jump at the chance he did. So, my hairy mate picked up Nana's prescription, jumped into his beat-up 1960-something Triumph Herald, and headed out to Hamilton to pick me up. I was dressed and waiting at the door. Mom was hovering behind me in glee. We drove just out of town to Dad's place. Dad got to the door before we got from the car to the veranda, and he was practically vibrating on the spot with a grin from ear to ear, gleefully telling us to come in. We wandered down the hall to Nana's room, and my hairy mate politely knocked on the door. Yes? I brought your medicine from Morrinsville, Mrs. Nana. Nana sounded delighted, and she invited him in. So, in he went, in his boots, tattered jeans, and crumpled shirt, with his long, greasy, uncombed hair and scruffy beard, and he handed her the package containing her medicine. Now Nana was brought up properly, as she kept telling us, and therefore she had no choice but to say thank you, and say it in a nice tone of voice and smile, despite the fact that she was still staring in disbelief at the person who had brought her medicine to her, and the words probably tasted like bile. My hairy mate politely replied, "You're welcome." We left all the way back to Mom's place. I reckon that Nana was probably in the bathroom pouring household bleach on her tongue, and seriously considering just ripping it out and being done with it after having to say thank you to a bloody hairy. Still, of all the people who worked to bring this bit of revenge together, I don't think anyone put in quite as much effort as Nana, who spent the better part of an afternoon giving us irrelevant components. Without her tirades against younger brother's bloody hairy mates and Dad's failure to get her medicine, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to exact revenge for some of the stuff she put us through over the years. The fact that we were able to take revenge by being unfailingly helpful and nice was just icing on the cake. I live in a small complex with a communal parking lot, no reserved spaces. On my wife's birthday, she invited a friend over to go out celebrating. When her friend showed up, there happened to be a tree that had fallen in the lot and plucked half of it off while it was being cleared. The only spot she could get to was one of the two disabled spots in the lot. Not a problem, since she had a valid handicap tag, which was displayed. She asked when she came in if it was okay for her to park there, and I said it was fine since she was legally allowed to, and the only person in the complex to use the spots could park in the next spot. We got ready to go out, and when I went to get my car, I noticed the car that usually parked in the disabled spot had parked directly behind our friend, plugging her in, and she left the other disabled spot empty. I told the apartment manager to please have her move her car by morning. We went out for a nice night of clubbing and got home at 3 a.m. The car was still plugged in, and the other disabled spot was still empty, so I called the police. They showed up, looked at the way she was parked, and started laughing. Why didn't she just park in the next spot? I told him I didn't know, and he said that 3:30 a.m., well, let's wake her up and ask. He did that cop knock on her door to wake her up and told her to move her car. She began yelling at him, "That's my spot, and I'm teaching someone a lesson." He explained to her that it is not her personal spot, and there was another one right next to it, even closer to her door. He told her to move her car immediately and to think about what she was going to say next, because she was really close to going to jail. She moved the car and never spoke to me again. But she had also yelled at the apartment manager when he asked her to move it. Turns out she was behind in her rent, so they started eviction proceedings. Manager then paid me $150 to take her boxed up stuff and throw it in the building's dirty basement. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.